try and get some idea of just how important this moment might be for Yemen, I spoke to Dr. Elisabeth Kendall, Senior Research Fellow at Pembroke College, Oxford. I put it to her that the withdrawal from Hodeidah has taken a very long time.
It has taken a very long time, and that has been disappointing and frustrating for the United Nations Special Envoy and everybody else, because we were all so amazed and excited that something had come out of the Stockholm talks in December. But Hodeidah is just one very small part of an incredibly protracted and complicated conflict now. So although there was a big fanfare about the Hodeidah agreement having been made, it was still just one tiny part of a very broad conflict. The reason it was important was because it was the port through which about 70% of the aid came, and that Yemenis were suffering starvation. So the liberation of Hodeidah was incredibly important. The rest of the country is a whole different ballgame. It doesn't necessarily follow that just because the rebels are going to withdraw from Hodeidah port and two other smaller ports to the north, that the war will somehow start to end. I think there's a great Churchill quote, where it's possibly the end of the beginning, but not the beginning of the end.
This conflict has been internationally supported, and we're here talking primarily, I suppose, about direct support by Saudi Arabia and various other Gulf states. And in the early days, some logistical support from UK and France as well. For 4 years, this was supposed to be a brief intervention by Saudi Arabia to support what were then government forces. Saudi Arabia has been humiliated, on the defensive, in difficulties. How would you typify it?
I think Saudi Arabia has been proven to have made an unfortunate decision by entering the war. I would hesitate to call it humiliation, but I do think that Saudi Arabia has lost a great deal of international credibility. Much of the humanitarian crisis, which is catastrophic, is blamed on the Saudi-led coalition, and that's not entirely fair. Much of it is also due to mismanagement by the Houthis, but both sides bear blame. And it wasn't the quick war, nor did it achieve any of Saudi's 3 major public war aims, which were to push back Iran, Iranian influence has increased, to prevent Yemen from fragmenting, Yemen has fragmented, and to protect its southern border and restore the government of President Hadi. Hadi doesn't even live in Yemen, and the southern border still of Saudi Arabia is unsafe.
So, as we quite often say of these protracted and very bloody conflicts, how does it end?
$60 million question. How does it end? Well, this is, as I said, a good step. The Houthis have agreed to withdraw from 3 symbolic ports, and that won't be enough. We need to get in more stakeholders, because the Houthi rebels and the so-called legitimate government of President Hadi are just 2 sides in a conflict that has many sides.
Because we have Al-Qaeda operating in the south, an IS affiliate operating in the south as well.
Yes, the terrorism problem hasn't gone away, but it has been severely degraded. So that's not so much what I'm talking about. What I mean is the southern movement, the secessionists in the south, and within the south, many other little tribal militias and other smaller independence movements. I think that actually peace needs to be very carefully watched, because it could be the beginning of a shattering of the major conflict into lots of smaller conflicts.
The former leader used to say, he said that governing Yemen was like dancing on the heads of snakes.
It is. It's one of the few things he said that was sensible.
Dr. Elisabeth Kendall from Pembroke College, Oxford.